Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and this is probably going to turn into kind of a long one because I'm doing multiple things here today, but I'm ready to do my first impressions on the Vero Impulse Mini, and in tandem with that, I'm going to be trying something that I haven't done before. This will be my first time experimenting with it. I have here some Skiff Bearings. These are Skiff Rocket Glide rings, I think he calls them. They're bearings that I've been told should be the exact right size to go into this knife. I've got two sets in here, and I actually have another set on my desk somewhere. So if this goes well, I may end up tossing these into several of my knives, but this will be my first experiment throwing these bearings into a knife. The bearings that come in the Impulse Mini are like nylon caged bearings. These are brass caged bearings, and I've just heard really, really good things about Skiff bearings in general, so I'm curious to see what all the hubbub is about. But before I throw this in, I want to share my first impressions before I change anything, right? I haven't done anything to this knife other than tighten the pivot 2 times because it's started to walk a little bit. When I put it back together, I'll probably put a little blue Loctite as I adjust it so I get it just right, and I'll leave it, let that set so that it doesn't walk anymore. That's not a problem unique to Vero knives. I've had plenty of knives that I have to adjust the pivot when I play with them a ton because it comes a little loose. So nothing has been done to this other than that so far. So at the moment, that's where this is. Another thing that I want to share, when I unboxed this knife, I wasn't allowed to share it yet, but I had already untubed my Vero Engineering mashup with Knafs, aka Ben Peterson, and Sam Raven the Pirate, the poster, and something really cool has happened since. So I unboxed that before I got this. That's part of why I got this knife. Having the poster, I was already considering getting an Impulse Mini. I really wanted one, and then when I got the poster, I was like, I gotta pull the trigger on one. So I was able to get the knife, which was great. And then I unboxed the poster, got the knife, shared the knife unboxing, and then was able to share that because they kind of went live with the news of the poster. And then yesterday, so I've been wanting to put the poster in a frame. This is all over the place. Bear with me, people. I've been wanting to put the poster into a frame. And yesterday, I was out doing knife stuff with my knife friends. I was hanging out at a machine shop where they make knives and stuff. I was with my buddy who's behind Cerberus Knives and Jacob Ginsberg from Jacob Creates, and just hanging out with knife dudes for like the whole day, talking knives and stuff. And I got home, and my wife, who is freaking amazing, put the poster in a frame for me. So check this out. This is the Vero times Knafs times Raven the Pirate poster, and my wife put it in a frame for me. How freaking perfect is that? I picked a winner, my friends. So yeah, this is the Impulse Mini, and this is my Impulse Mini. Look at that. Whoop, whoop. So I won on this one. I think my wife is even going to let me put it on my desk, which is cool. I don't get much of a say at all about what goes up around the house, ever. But this, because it's in a white frame, and it's not like super dark, the image, and because it looks kind of cool and artistic, I think I'm actually gonna get the go-ahead to put it up in my house. So that's pretty exciting. I'll be staring at a disassembled version of a knife that I have assembled all the time. And if I get stuck today while doing the disassembly, I can look at this and see what all the parts are. It won't tell me how to put it back together, but I'm sure I won't get stuck. We'll be fine. Anyways, this is really cool. So shout out to my wife for being awesome, and shout out to Vero and Ben Peterson and Sam Raven the Pirate for making this happen. I think by the time this goes live, pre-orders will already be closed on this, but yeah, let me know down below if you got in on this pre-order, because these are freaking dope. So there's the poster in the frame. All right, so let's talk first impressions of the knife, and then we'll start pulling it apart and messing with the bearings. And if you're just here for the first impressions, then skip the end, because that'll be me disassembling it and putting Skiff bearings in it. Anyway, so this is an interesting one for me. Prior to having this one, and prior even to having my Axon, I had borrowed an Impulse and a Synapse from my buddy to review, and I checked both of those out. I spent about a week with each of them, and I did my full reviews on them, and it was an interesting process. If you're not familiar, I'll put it in a nutshell. When I first got the knives, I was a little bit hesitant about them because I had only heard positive things. I seemed to just see everybody who was talking about Vero knives saying that they were like the new greatest thing and there were no flaws with them and they were perfect and yada yada yada, right? And I found it hard to believe that they were actually that good. I assumed that it was just like, oh, Joseph Vero has a bunch of friends who bought his first edition of his knife or his knives, and they're the ones who are talking about it. And that's what I'm hearing. But so I got the knives, I boxed them. My first impressions of both of them was like, I didn't really get it. I wasn't super into them. Thought there were parts about them that were definitely nice, but there were things that I saw to be flaws. Luckily, a mutual friend between Jason and I, or between Joseph and I, his name is Jason, he's been on my podcast, he kind of played matchmaker, got me to get on the phone with Joseph and ask him a bunch of questions about the things that I was not understanding about his knives. So ever since then, my full review ended up being very positive. The same negative that was in my full review of the full-size Impulse is really going to be my negative here so far, first impressions wise, if we're being honest. So spoiler alert there. But I got it after that. And virtually all of my issues with them were things that I just frankly genuinely didn't really understand about the knives. So what that was in a nutshell was the way that this flipper tab works. It is different. This is a different flipper tab. It functions unlike other flipper tabs. As you can see, the profile of it is different, and it's set into this notch. And so if you pull straight down, you can see your finger is going to land in that notch, kind of where this curve is coming out, right? But beyond that, it's actually widened out internally. So that wall of material, the scale gets really thin right there. So what I was doing wrong when I first got this knife, or the Impulse, I should say, when I first got the Impulse and Synapse, is I was pulling straight down like this, watch. And I was landing, it hurts. I was landing right in that pocket, and it sucks. It sucks to land there. I do not like that. Turns out that's not the way you're supposed to flip these knives. I assumed I should be flipping it like I flip every other knife, but it's mechanically, it works differently. So the way that it clicks, the way that it makes sense, is that instead of drawing a line straight down when you're flipping, you're supposed to draw a line outwards. See how my finger's coming kind of away and off of the knife? And that not only keeps my finger from landing in that awkward spot, but it gives me the most satisfying flick. It uses the mechanics the way they're supposed to be used to get this knife to engage. Oop, I'm holding the lock bar. This is awkward to do in front of the camera like a weirdo. It gets the knife to engage in the best way possible. So, understanding that made me all of a sudden like the action. Plus, I love knives that I can middle finger flick. So the fact that it has the V spot back here is what it's currently known as. This groove back here in the blade. That makes it's designed to middle finger flick, and it's amazing at it. So the fact that I can middle finger flick this knife inherently makes me like it a lot more. It's my favorite way to deploy a knife, and I love that. And the fact that it's done a little differently by having a slot, or a V spot if you want to call it that. It's different than having a hole there, and that's kind of fresh and exciting. I don't find myself thumb deploying knives with holes very often. I'm a middle finger flick kind of guy, so I kind of like that he also kept the show side totally sterile by not having that slot pass all the way through. Really, really cool touch. So now that I understand these knives better, I like them a lot more. When I flip it the way it's designed to be flipped, I love it. When I flip it the wrong way, it doesn't feel good. It's because I'm flipping it the wrong way. So that makes sense. So let's talk about this knife materials-wise, and then I'll just kind of do a quick rundown of where I'm at with it beyond what I've already said. Materials on this, just like virtually every Vero, or literally every Vero up to this point, we're rocking an M390 blade. On the Impulse and here on the Mini Impulse, you get this kind of same Tanto profile. You'll notice this one is the hand-rubbed finish. So it's a horizontal hand-rubbed satin, and I think it looks absolutely phenomenal. Plus on top of that, you get this really cool dimension where the swedge is like a vertical belt satin, and then the tip for the compound point of the tanto is also a vertical satin. See if I can get that to reflect a little bit. And it's going in a slightly different angle than the swedge is. So you've got this horizontal hand satin, and then you've got this vertical satin for the like tanto tip and a different vertical for the swedge. And it all just gets this really cool angular look to it. And I love that. So gorgeous M390 blade. You'll see on the spine is where Vero is printed. It's a good move, keeps all of the lettering and everything off of the blade. And then under here, hope it'll pick up, you'll see this one is number 129. So I'm not sure how big this run was on Impulse Minis. I want to say it was only 300, but I could be wrong. So I have number 129. Yeah, so beautiful blade. And then in terms of the rest of the construction, it's a titanium frame lock. So we've got titanium show scale, all titanium hardware, titanium clip. It is a frame lock with a hardened insert. So you do have a stainless steel insert in there, which also doubles as an over travel stop. And then you have a titanium backspacer, and that's it. So it's titanium everything, and then an M390 blade and a hardened steel insert. So yeah, lots of good happening in terms of materials. This is a premium knife in terms of the materials used on it. So let's talk about, I guess there's not much new that I have to say about this knife that I didn't have to say about the full-size Impulse. Obviously, the size of this knife is a little different, but there's really only one gripe coming into this first impressions-wise that I have with the design of the knife. And it's worth talking about, but it's also worth talking or noting that Joseph has commented on the subject and said that on some of the future models, at least, I don't know what his whole catalog will look like, the clip is going to be changing. But I don't like these clips. I think visually it is an excellent looking clip. It fits the lines of the knife incredibly well. The design looks awesome. But this clip in hand, because it comes up here and then doesn't plateau, like a lot of clips you'll see they kind of bend upwards like this one does, but then they have a flat, right? And they're usually a little bit rounded. This one just comes up, and it's a little bit harsh for me in hand if I'm grabbing onto this knife in this grip back here or choked up in this grip. Either way, it digs into my palm a little bit. I don't like that. I would have an easier time forgiving that it can be a little bit hot spotty if it was really good in pocket. But even my preferences aside, my preferences are loop over style deep carry clips that go all the way to the butt end of the knife. I love that. I can forgive on a lot of titanium clips that they went with the clip that seems nicer, feels nicer, looks nicer over a bent style clip, right? So that aside, the distance between the scale and the pocket clip, it is a really tight gap in here. And what that means is it just binds up in my pocket a lot. And like using two hands, I have to force this knife into pocket. And a lot of the time, even pulling it out of pocket, I have to use one hand to hold the pocket kind of tight and then pull hard. And it's way too tight in pocket. I've tried it now in a couple of different pairs of jeans. It's the same thing on my Axon. I don't remember distinctly how tight it was on the Synapse or the Impulse that I handled before, whether it was this tight or tighter or what, but that's my gripe with the pocket clips, is they're way too tight. It could be this shape, I think. If he kept this same milled titanium shape, I'd be fine with it. I like the way it looks, like I said, but it needs to have more clearance underneath, and it should plateau a little bit here. That's just my opinion. Other people I've heard from don't have any issues with the clip. They find it works well for them. I don't know. that's just me. But literally, I just recently did my Axon full review, so I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. This is just the first impressions of this one, though. But outside of the clip, genuinely, I'm loving everything about this knife. The ergos for me, other than the clip, are phenomenal. I like to hold the knife up here. This is, I think, the way Joseph explained to me that he holds the knife. So I put my foremost finger kind of up onto the flat next to go into this groove, if you will. Pinky lands behind there. Super comfortable, great grip. I have an awesome kind of sensation of control over the blade from here, and it makes this knife feel even more capable at cutting. Plus, this blade is ground really well. It's nice and thin down behind the edge. The tanto, you get a little bit of kind of a secondary tip there. A lot of people refer to it as, so I find if I am like cutting tape on a box, instead of having to pivot all the way to get this tip into the material, I can just pivot a little bit and kind of drag that secondary tip through the material, which is very nice. So it cuts well, it goes in hand well. Even when I'm not choked up, it's also comfortable back here. I'm still getting all 4 fingers on the knife, even just barely. This knife, being the Impulse Mini, by the way, is still what I would consider an average, like normal EDC size knife. I'm not positive what the blade length is on it. I want to say it's still like 3.5 inches, maybe 3.4. It's like identical in size to the Axon, which is like a perfect size knife for me. So I love the size of this knife. The only reason that this is a mini is because the Impulse is huge. That's a very big knife. So I think when some people see the name mini, they assume this is small, like the size of a Synapse, which has like a 3-inch blade. It's not. This is still a proper, I don't know, full-size knife. I don't know how you'd rank sizes of knives. It's not oversized. It's not gigantic, but this is a primary size knife for me. This is a front right pocket. This is not a secondary size knife any day of the week. Action on this guy is even better than my Axon. It's really good. This detent is nice and crisp, and it's just, I have to watch out for the lock bar. Super snappy on deployment, and then I don't know, it's going to be interesting tossing these Skiff bearings in because it's already silky smooth. I mean, I'm not having to coax it much. Why am I landing on that so weird? It's hard doing this for the camera. But yeah, deployment is very snappy, and then it's just silky smooth on closure. I literally kind of feel bad putting different bearings in it because it's functioning so perfectly. But I've got these Skiff bearings here, and I've been meaning to try them on something. This one doesn't have brass cage bearings in it to begin with, which is part of what makes me think this will be a great kind of subject to try them on. And if they don't make it better, I'll just toss these back in. I'm confident I can get this knife put back together, and it'll be fine. But yeah, so I love the ergos on this, other than the clip digging into my hand a little bit. I love the action. It's a great cutter. I'm not a huge fan of carrying it just because of the way that clip interfaces with my pocket. It's not overly heavy either. There is quite a bit of internal milling in here. So even though it's a titanium frame lock, it's an all metal construction. It's not a featherweight, don't get me wrong, but it's an excellent weight for it, and it feels kind of right. Some knives, definitely you hold them in hand and it's like, oh, that's too heavy for the size that it is. Other ones, it's like sometimes things are so light they feel kind of cheap. This is just kind of right in the middle where it feels like an appropriate weight. There's internal milling going on here. It's just a solid construction, and so it's not a featherweight either. Anyway, I love it. If I could wave a magic wand, I've said this before, and change the pocket clip, it would be magnifique for me. But even with the pocket clip being one of my least favorite pocket clips of knives I actually regularly carry, I still want to put this in pocket and carry it and cut with it because I love it so much in every other way. This action too. I don't know if everybody's is this smooth out of the box. I don't know if part of it is because this one's the hand satin, so it's just extra silky in there or what, but this thing is bananas how smooth it is. So we'll see if the Skiffs make it better or worse or the same. I don't know, but I think that's good on first impressions. So we're going to go ahead, switch the camera around, and toss these Skiff bearings in and see what happens. All right, so I've got, I think, everything that I need for this job laid out here. I've got the bearings themselves. The specs on these are 5mm pivot. The balls are 0.0625 inches, 11 count ball bearings per. ID 0.200 inches. OD 0.370 inches. Thickness is 0.050 inches. I don't know if that's way too much information or what, but That's what it says on the baggie in here. So those are the ones I'm using. Those are the ones I've been told will fit in here. I don't think I'll need the T10. I'm pretty sure all of the hardware on this entire knife is comprised of T8s. So I've got some Loctite here. I know a lot of people prefer the stick of Loctite. I prefer the bottle. I don't know, I don't have a hard time putting just a dab on stuff usually. I don't find I'm like making messes with it, and I feel like I get better performance, at least based on what I hear. Sometimes people complain about stuff still coming loose when they've used the stick. I don't know, I've heard this is a little bit better, but totally anecdotal. Use whatever you want. That's what I use. I've got some KPL here as well. I'll definitely be putting some of that on. I always like having some Q-tips around when I'm doing stuff like this, but we're gonna go ahead and get this knife pulled apart. So I'm gonna start with the body screws. I am not the premier knife maintenance guy. If you're looking for how-tos on doing this stuff, I'm probably not the right guy for you. I feel like that should be the clip screw too, unless I'm crazy. We'll see if maybe there's another screw internally. Get that body screw off of there. Oh, a little more to go. Yeah, I always hesitate to do videos like this because I worry people are gonna think that I'm the guy they should be watching for learning how to do this kind of stuff, and it's fine with me if this helps you to figure it out on your own, but I'm not a professional, so come on. There we go. So those two body screws look like they're the same size, and we've got the long one that goes through to the clip. I don't know. Doesn't matter if the clip comes off, I guess. I don't need it to come off, but let's get the pivot out of here. Now, if this pivot is the same as they were on the Synapse and the Impulse, the full-size Impulse, I think it's a little bit of a different pivot system than you see. Oh, there is another screw in there. Look at that for the pocket clip. So I'm just going to leave that on. I don't need to take the pocket clip off for this. Yeah, so as I was saying, this pivot system, I believe, is a little bit different than many others. I also like that those have little ridges on them, so they set in there right where they're supposed to be. It's a good backspacer. I keep interrupting myself, my goodness. This pivot, because it is, I believe, the way it was explained to me, yeah, on this side, you can adjust how tight or how loose it is, come on here by kind of threading this onto that plate, and then once it's on, you can't really adjust that anymore. It's just on there, right? And it is keyed on this side. So once that's on there and this piece is at the tightness that you want, that adjusts how much ultimately you'll have for a tightness to like free dropping ratio. So you can have infinite adjustability yourself as the end user, whether you want to have a little bit more play and thus have a super free droppy blade, or if like some people genuinely don't want their blade to drop shut, that's their preference, they want it to be tighter, you can adjust that in. I've found with these it's possible to get it to not have any play and still be pretty free droppy. So that's just going to be what it's going to be. But I'm going to leave this how it is because the way it was from factory was dialed the way I like it. So let's make sure these bearings go in a particular way. No, they look to be the same side to side to me. So I don't think it will matter which way I put the new ones in. I'm just going to leave the lube that's on there on. This thing has been doing great so far, so I don't necessarily feel like I need to change everything up so much. I just want to pop the new ones in. So that is a steel washer. I don't know if you saw that come out. I just popped it back in, but to keep the titanium from wearing with the ball bearings, there's a hardened steel washer in there, which is smart. It keeps the bearings from running on the titanium. It's just a nice little touch there. Pop that back so I don't lose it. Yeah, the washer stayed in on this side. You can also see, I don't know how clear it is, I can kind of see where the ball bearings were sitting. They've started to run a little track in there, this side as well. I don't know if it's just because they've like left indentations in the grease that's on the surface there, but I can kind of see indentations from the ball bearings on there. All right, so there's both sides. Let's go ahead and pull these out of the bag. See what we've got in here. Come on. These are greasy in there. All right, some nice moist bearings for you. Now what I'm gonna do, actually let's put one of these side by side with the factory one real quick. Yeah, it looks like it's the same size. Let me hold this up closer. If you look at these side by side, I know in some of the Vero knives it's brass caged bearings. In fact, in the Axon it's brass caged bearings. I'm not positive. I feel like somebody asked Joseph and I heard the reason, but I don't remember why he went with the nylon caged bearings in the Impulse Mini, but I remember he had a reason for it. I don't know. I like brass cage bearings, so I'm gonna toss them in. It seems nicer to me to have metal than plastic, but that's just me. So I'm gonna put a nice tiny little dab on here, just on each side. In fact, I'll do kind of do 4 corners here of KPL. Worst case, I've got a little KPL that I need to wipe off after. I'd rather have a little bit too much than not enough in there. So that's clear for now. Now let's toss that guy right there. It does feel like it's got a little bit of kind of wiggle in that space compared to how the nylon one did, or the factory one, but I'd imagine the pivot screw going up through that should hold it perfectly tight anyways. We shall see. Maybe I end up with blade play and I take them right out and go back to factory. I don't know. There we go. Let's get this pivot screw in here. Get to where pivot screw is seated. There it is. Because it's keyed, I gotta make sure I'm just right on there. Now let's take this. I'll put a dribble of KPL on this too. I like to just put KPL on all of the surfaces that are moving. Okay, KPL down. Excellent. Try not to ruin my hand rub blade by setting it on the screws up there. All right, that is gravy. Put a tiny bit more KPL here, here. The detent track looks like it's doing pretty well. I have some KPL heavy. Supposedly that's the better thing to use on the detent track, but I didn't grab it, so I'm just gonna put regular KPL on there. It's all lubed up in here right now. And yeah, that should be, let's see if this wants to stay long enough for me to get it. Excellent. You know what I should have done before I did that is set my backspacer in. So we're gonna see if I can cheat that in real quick. Okay, oh, there we go. Ooh. Having it with those little notches for itself really helps out. All right, so just holding the knife together here for a second, making sure everything looks right before I go ahead and start putting the stuff back on it. Let's throw this pivot in here, start holding everything together. It's a really pretty pivot screw, so be careful while I'm doing this not to gash it up or anything. Let's take this guy. I love that all of the hardware on here is just all T8 bits. It makes a difference when all you have to use is one tool, keeps everything super simple, and they're better than T6 in the sense that you have a more robust bit and you worry less about stripping it or stripping your tool into it, you know, like it just, I love that. I appreciate that there aren't T6s on this knife. There we go. Okay, so that's the final body screw and the clip screw. I went ahead and tightened that pretty hard. Just make sure these are all hand tight now. Yeah, that one had another little ways to go, didn't it? All right, so those are in. Let's see how I am on centering. Oh, look at that. I am dead center right off the bat, so that's good. Now let's see how the action feels. Okay. It doesn't feel worse. I don't know yet that I'd say it feels better, but these have just been dropped in. Yeah, that feels pretty good. All right. They're in. So, I guess for now, I'll just use it like this for a little bit. Let's check for play. There's the slightest hint of side to side. Let's see what happens when I tighten it just a hair. Okay, so there's no play there. Oh, still feels as drop shutty. It looks like we're just about centered. Is it off? I don't know, that looks pretty dead on to me. So, no play. Centered. Action feels pretty good. Doesn't feel gritty or anything. All right, time will tell. I'll keep playing with it. I'll see if it gets any better. If all of a sudden something feels worse, or I don't know. We'll keep you updated. By the time I do the full review, we'll see if these have stayed in or if I've swapped them out. If I end up loving them, like I said, I've got this other set here that'll fit in the Axon or my Vox Snays F5.5, or I've got a number of knives that these will fit in, and I have another set than this, so I've got 2 more sets just like this, and yeah, we'll see how it ends up going, but so far feels good to me. All right, there we go. So thanks for watching, guys. I guess that's been my first impressions / framed poster reveal / skiff bearing swap on this guy. And I'm sure it's been a long one. If you've watched the whole thing, you are awesome. But yeah, thanks. I'll see you on the next one.